Funny. I think it's awesome. So I got, Henry is my 9-year-old, and he's been doing it, so he's third grade, I think. He's been doing it since third,
Already, huh? Welcome everyone to our North Ogden City Council meeting. Now will come to order. We'd ask that you mute your cell phones, including my own, so there won't be any disturbance during the meeting. We'll begin the meeting with a pledge of allegiance and invocation. I guess it's been delegated to me this evening. Our dear Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity of gathering here this evening at a city council meeting. We're thankful for the freedoms and wonderful blessings that we enjoy living in the city of North Ogden. We're grateful for the citizens and their participation. We're grateful for the good things of life that surround us in this area. We're thankful for every blessing that we enjoy, liberty and happiness in our homes and families. We pray now that as we deliberate items this evening, that thy guiding hand and blessings may be with us, and that all concerned may express themselves in an appropriate way, and we may have an enjoyable and workable evening. We pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Would you stand and repeat after me the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda is the discussion and action to consider the council meeting minutes of April 10th and April 17th. Do I have a motion from the council?
Mayor, I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved that we approve the consent agenda by Councilman Swanson.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Stoker. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comments. We invite anyone to come to the podium and state their name and their address as they approach the podium.
Dale Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. And the reason I came is just to kind of give you some thoughts or some feelings that I had, just as a suggestion, because as you know, some of you are aware, I was there in the court proceedings in the amphitheater lawsuit. I've followed some of this stuff really closely, and some of the things that Brent Taylor had said from Afghanistan about we did everything possible to be transparent and to communicate with the city. And yet, we just got back from the UK. I opened my mail, and I get a city water report in the city bill. I don't ever remember seeing anything like this having to do with some of these major projects that we're doing. We said we put it on Facebook, we put it on the web page, we posted it somewhere, but there's a lot of people who don't even have computers. There are many people. Facebook is an entertainment media. I look in here and I see very detailed explanations of parts per millions of particles in the water. And what I would like to see is for some things like what we're here for the open house, to have come in the city newsletter with not just, now this is pretty good, this is better than what we've seen in some of the things, not just the pretty graphics, but also real detailed explanation of the financial end of it, because that was probably the thing as we got into the amphitheater issue, as we attended some of those open houses, and we were there, there's a lot of accusations that people are late to the game or whatever, but as we were there, what we didn't see is the details, the real details of why we had gone from $500,000 to almost $5 million, and an almost 10-fold explosion in a very short period of time. And we got to select colors of exteriors instead of saying, here's 3 options, don't do it, this size, this size, this size. And that would be one thing that I would suggest on this community pond. I've asked the technical, or the Jones and the other lady that was here, a lot of details that they did not have the answers to, things like a mosquito abatement, rat control. What's the real depth of this? You know, where's our, I'm very familiar with that property. I used to keep horses down there. I used to spend time talking to Tom Chambers, and I knew what he was doing. And there's a lot of artesian water down there, soil stability issues, maybe a mixing of artesian water with what's coming through Pineview, which could contaminate our drinking supply. So I just wanted to get up and just give a suggestion that when we have these major projects, largest expenditures in city history, that one media that we could explore informing people with is in the bills. Everybody gets their city utility bill, and they all open that and look at that, and they probably all read this. So that's just something I would just like to throw out there. And at this point, I think that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment and suggestion. Appreciate that.
Excuse me.
Jim Urey, 1615 North Mountain Road. Just a couple of suggestions. When I got a notice or saw a notice that there was going to be an open house here from 4 to 6, I'm not sure that there's a lot of people that can come from 4 to 6. I think that needs to be held later in the evening if you really wanted people to come out and say what they think about these kind of things. I was able to get here by 5:30, but there wasn't a big attendance when I got here. So I think if it's an open house on an important thing like this, that maybe it ought to be held a little later in the evening, and so more people could get to them. The second thing that concerns me is we raise a question now on our recycling and the tipping fees seem to continue to go up on our garbage. I might suggest that we look. There's people that are putting their lawn clippings in the garbage can, which costs us all money because it weighs a lot, and plus the tipping fees go up. I might suggest that we say, there's people that are dumping their grass clippings up at the pit there, and they have to buy a card, and it costs them $3 to go in. If people wanted to put their grass clippings in, say, a green can that we might furnish them instead of a blue or black one, and we were to charge them then $12 a month, that'd cover that'd be equal to a $3 trip up here every week to dump their grass clippings. I don't think it's fair for all of the citizens to have to keep paying more and more for garbage when a lot of us mulch our lawns or pay the $3 to go up and dump instead of putting them in the garbage can.
Thank you for your comment.
Sean Casey, 2444 Barker Parkway. You guys all missed a great show last week at Ogden Amphitheater. It was the Flaming Lips. Coming up is Thievery Corporation in 4 weeks. I think 4 weeks. There's Bonobo in 3 weeks. Please check it out. Download an SPL meter for your phone. They're close enough. It'll give you an idea. On the amphitheater, it is a freedom of speech, freedom of expression issue. At this point, we need to use it. It's built. If it's going to be government speech, you will severely limit its usage, but I would really like to see some of that addressed. I'm a very strong First Amendment proponent, and I need to see some action in that direction. On the pond, I echo the sentiments that have been stated, that 4 o'clock is a weird time. I own my own business. It's a strange time to have an open house, and I appreciated having the Jones Associates representative here. Having designed water ski lakes since I was in my 20s, there are some things that have not been thought through. I would like to give you some contacts of people who can really help you. One, Mark Parker. He's managed Manaway's large pond for, 4 decades. Also, the 21st Street Pond in Ogden City. He's been associated with that, managed it at times for also about 4 decades. His number is 801-726-8065. And I also gave it to, I think his name was Matt from Jones Associates. He approached me. I thought maybe having some direction for you guys.
What's his name again?
Mark Parker. And he's a old-timer, Angus bull, water skier, eccentric misfit, fun guy. So you'll like talking to him. He'll make time for you. Dave Good from Good Skis and Ski Poles is another guy you guys should reach out to. And he's down in Ogden sometimes. He's visited most man-made lakes in the nation. I've only visited the ones in the Northwest. You have problems you're getting into that you don't know about. And Matt is clued in a little bit to some of those problems. But we do need to think about what $2 million roughly buys us, regardless how you fund it. In my estimation, it buys us a beach for people who are looking for a good time, who don't want to pay. If you go to Manaway this weekend, just go hang out at the beach on Manaway. Look at the trash at Manaway. They have a part-time sheriff that helps patrol, and they have Mark Parker, and they cannot keep up with the trash. And most of the people that use that beach are out-of-towners. It's not people from Manaway. It's not people from the surrounding area from Brigham City. Some, but sure, it's something to look at. Also look at the history of Harriman's Lake Project. This is one that was new to me. Talking with Greg, who's in your Parks and Trails department, the people who are visiting that lake, pond, swimming hole, will knock on the doors of the residents asking for ketchup or, hey man, do you have this, or a life jacket? And so it's kind of people who think that it's just another public park from a state are just going to invade if it's a cool spot. So if we make it cool, it will be used. And I think how it's used, we need to see that study. I don't see that study. Another study I don't see is how much will it cost us? I mean, I can give you my gut feel, but I would really like to see somebody that has managed, I wanted like Harriman's assets and how that has happened. And I would like to see another one done, an open house that's publicized outside of the advertising book that you call the city official newspaper or magazine. It's a nightmare it's ugly. It's just not interesting. It's just trash. I'd like to see that go away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I just wanted to air some concerns that I have with this agreement with Double Art Ranch. We're making a lot of concessions with them. That while I understand it's a swap of land, and it's still an impact upon our city, and I think we need to be really careful how we give our money away, because basically that's what we're going to do. With that, also, my concern is the amount of traffic we're going to now put onto 2550, because right now there is no exit onto 2600, and so we're going to put more traffic on there, which we've already added with the Maverick. Our fire department is on that road, as you know, and I'm really concerned. It's not very wide, and if the traffic is backed up at the traffic light and the fire department needs to get out, that is going to be a huge issue. I have concerns also. We actually kept our horses at what was Shooting Star Ranch at the time for a little bit there. I mean, you would step and you were like knee deep in. And I worry about that, the effect it's going to have on where we're building, because that's about the area where they were. I think I'm glad we have someone that's going to study the environmental thing with that. But mosquitoes are a big issue. I don't know if many of you have been down to Buse Pond, but the number of rats and ducks that they now have down there. And we already have a duck issue in North Ogden, as we know, by Lee's. And I think just adding more open water that's going to be sitting there all the time is going to really create a nice habitat for the ducks. I've heard that it is a use at your own risk right now, and that's a huge concern because if you're going to have little kids out there, you know, and parents are on the beach and not really paying attention, they talked about Herman's Pond. They've actually had several deaths at Herman's Pond because of that. You know, big kids running into little kids, knocking them down. It is a sand-based bottom, I understand, for the basin and for the pond part of it. And, you know, your feet can sink down into that. And if you get stuck and some big kid knocks you over. So I have some really serious concerns, I understand. My other serious concern is also we're basing on this in the hopes that we will get businesses on the old retention pond. And unfortunately, we have no guarantee of that. We're not bringing in a lot of businesses yet. I do know, like out in Far West, north of the Maverick out there, all that land is for sale, commercial, which means we could lose out on a lot of stuff because they're going to build out there. So I think we really need to consider how much recreation. We have a lot of parks that are falling apart, and yet we seem to be building lots of new stuff that maybe not everybody will use. And so I would really ask that you can, you consider just how quickly we seem to be giving the developers. And I did want to put a question. We were actually out of the country last week, so we were not able to come to the city council meeting. But in watching it, I had some real concerns with the developer that came in from Visionary Homes, asking to reduce it down to stucco. That man actually sat in the meetings where the final decision was made on the hardboard and all that kind of stuff. So he knew that they were going to have to make that expense. And so I think we need to make sure that we stick with what we promised those residents. Phil did bring that up and stuff like that. To be quite honest with you, I think you need to just leave it alone. It's not our job to make them rich. If they can't make it, then they're going to have to reduce the number of houses they build. And I really don't think the residents behind that would be very sad about that. So I think if we really take the time to really start listening to our residents, I think sometimes we're kind of losing that listening ear. And I worry about that. We've got to listen. We have to listen. And we have to be willing to accept what they're saying, even if we don't agree with it. We won't all agree. We know that. They're the people that are the ones that are paying the bills. And so we really need to make sure that we're listening to our residents. And sometimes we get away from that. So I would ask that you really consider on the 1700, I know it's going back to the Planning Commission, but I would hope that you would say, even if the Planning Commission said that's okay, that you as a City Council would say no. We need to honour the residents and what we've worked very hard for. Thank you very much. The open house, I agree, the very wrong time. I think we needed to have it when people could come. I was lucky that I could, but there's a lot of people that can't. So I would have liked to see maybe 3 different concepts, 3 different ideas of what you were talking about. Maybe a smaller pond, maybe no pond at all, maybe just a nice area where people can go sit. And, you've got some flowing water from Pine View that, you can relax and unwind. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Julie, listening to you, I could tell you've been in England. Your accent's a little stronger.
We like the Queen's English.
My name is Kim Christensen. My address is 2428 Barker Parkway. I actually just have a couple questions, Mayor. I don't know if you can direct me to who I can get the answers from, or if anybody knows. As far as the budget goes, there is a proposed almost nearly $700,000. Sorry, that's a lot more than proposed for the budget for the amphitheater. Can you tell me what that is for? I've struggled to find what that might be for. Is that just additional costs on the $2.2 million that's already been budgeted for it, and they're exceeding what their budget is? Do you know that?
I believe, and you can add to this, John, but...
So, Council, that's for what we would call Phase 2 of the project. Those specifics of that haven't been identified. that was going to be identified as part of the ramp grant application that would be due in January. So the initial concept is lighting and speakers, and then some landscaping type of stuff, as well as finishing things inside the building. So
Seats.
I don't know that seats have been discussed as part of that
Okay.
as of yet, but I think that there'll be a future council meeting, and probably I'd even suggest an open house as well on that.
So is that something the citizens can give input on, yay or nay, or are you just moving forward with that and whether we say yay or nay on it? It's just something, the 700,000,
Yeah, part of that would be a grant, and if we don't get the grant, we won't spend it.
right,
Well, this
Okay.
phase 2 will go in another year if we have to.
right. And so you're not really sure then what it is specifically for yet.
It's not, it typically figures out that we'll get about half of that from a grant and the other half from impact fees. And if the grant doesn't come through, we'll just hold off until either we get a grant or figure something else out.
And so you're just kind of thinking that's probably for lights and sound and a fence, or we don't know yet. So we're just gonna
Phase
2. I mean, phase 2, it could be a number of things. So that's why I'm trying to find it, and so that's what are we budgeting for? It's hard. If you don't know exactly, then how are we budgeting for it? Anyway, I guess you don't have the answers.
we don't have all
that.
the answers. We know lights, sound. Was there parking in that?
No parking.
Landscaping.
Essentially, there's no one in the city who has an answer for what it's going to be spent on. With what we've been talking about is coming back and presenting. These are ideas of the type of projects that we think RAMP would support, and then after applying for the grant and with the council's input, identifying specific things to put into that grant application, then following through on those commitments to the RAMP Foundation.
Okay, so we're still on hold.
Okay, all right. Also, in the Double Lot pond, I don't know what to call it because I'm used to the whatever Star Ranch or whatever it was, or anyway, it's been called multiple different things. But as far as that, I really think, as far as a retention basin, I think it was a smart move to sell that one on 2700 and move the retention basin. I agree with that 100%. That's great real estate property to sell to businesses, whatever, that totally makes sense. We do need the retention/irrigation pond, and I agree with that 100%. I think that's a great idea. I do have concerns as we're moving forward with the recreational part of it. I was trying to get some answers at the open house, and I kind of, I guess, see if you can clear up a couple things for me. As far as the grant for the pond, that is just for the Pine View portion of the pond. Is that correct? So the grant is just, it won't cover, I mean, if we didn't put the recreation part of it in there, we would still get the grant, from what I understand.
2 items.
With the 2 items, because we're doing irrigation and we're doing a retention basin.
Correct.
Right, so we have 2 of the 3. We don't need to put the recreation part in
Correct.
for that grant. We'd still get it.
Right.
So, okay. I do worry about putting the recreation part in for a number of reasons. The upkeep, I know they say, well, you're going to have water flowing through that. Well, it's Pine View. I don't know if maybe you don't get weeds from Pine View. I get weeds from Pine View. I get a lot of weeds from Pine View. Some years are worse than others. And you're going to get weeds, even in sand. My sandbox is completely full. I actually just cleaned it out with my kids today, and it took us 2 hours. And my husband and the kids had been working on it a couple of days ago. So sand creates weeds too. And then you're going to have the sprinkling system. You're going to have restrooms that need to be upkept. And we see from other parks, they get used, they get worn down, they're going to have upkeep. What are the future expenses of this? This is going to fall on the city. Pine View's not going to help us with upkeep of the recreation part. They're just for Pine View. And so I am concerned about that part. We already have several things that are draining our city, the pool, and now an amphitheater, and now we want to add on a pond. When do we stop and say, we can't handle anymore? We're taxing our citizens to death. And yeah, the ramp, that's tax. And grants come from tax. And, you know, let's up the taxes more. No matter where you pull it from, it's still the money of the citizens, and it still needs to be raised to cover all of this. So that's my concern is, you know, at what point do you say enough is enough? We can't handle anymore, and we're draining our citizens, especially those that are on fixed incomes. You know, they can't handle, you add $10 more onto their bills, or $5 more onto their monthly bills, or whatever you're going to add on. That's $5 that for them is a meal at the grocery store. I can go get ramen noodles for my kids for the entire day, you know, and cover them and feed them. I mean, it is a big deal to some people. So take that into consideration. I hope you will. And I hope we have more discussions on this. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. Those suggestions would be good on the suggestion form we had here for us to accumulate and record.
Stephanie Casey, 2444 Barker Parkway. Mine's just going to be quick. You're discussing about the $300,000 from ramp for the budgeted 600, the next basically 700,000 for the next phase of the amphitheater. I just think you guys need to be really careful and clear on how we're communicating with the public. In the North Ogden Connection, on their Facebook page, they did a write-up of last week's meeting, and they said a ramp grant will cover $300,000 in park impact fees. This is already the assumption that we'll get it. We probably will, but I think we need to be really careful on how we're wording things. I've talked to many people who are assuming every bit of that amphitheater is covered by grants. And I just, you know, I think we need to be really honest with the way we're communicating, really clear and upfront. That grant is, you know, we're not even applying for it until January. So I just find that a little bit misleading. Thank you.
Thank you. That's why we won't do any more until we get the grant.
Yeah, we'll make sure that it's worded that way. You know, that's my problem, is it says what it will be, not we will be applying for this grant in January and we'll know.
Okay.
It makes it sound like it's already here and covered.
Okay.
So
thank you for your comment.
Robert Ball, 867 East, 1900 North. I just had a question about Orton Park. So I believe that AYSO has some sort of agreement with the city to have, like, you know, their goals at Orton Park, and then there's another organization that that plays every Sunday there. I mean, they have a trash problem. But I'm just very curious about what the city's relationship is with these organizations, and if they pay to have their goals there, or
they rent the park.
Okay. So
they pay for it. Yes.
Oh, okay. So do we do anything about the trash? Because if you come Monday, there's usually some trash left over. They're really not very good. But I'm just curious what we do.
Parks and Recreation would pick up the trash.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I failed at the beginning of the meeting to excuse Councilman Severine. He's out of town. There's no other public comments. We'll move on to item 4, discussion or action to consider an agreement with Double Art Ranch.
Mayor, can I add just 2 quick things? We did have a request from citizen Brent Taylor to have a public comment posted via video. I think that's something that the council should talk about and decide if they want to allow that. We haven't typically allowed that in the past via email, where we'd read the email, but it's been a request, and so I think it's okay for the council to talk about it. And then the second thing, on the open house council. It was actually supposed to be NCRS's open house / scoping meeting, and they didn't get their public notice in the newspaper in time, but we had already advertised it, so we kept that commitment, and I think our plan is to do a future open house at later in the evening when people can make it. So, but that's a concern that's been raised that I think we'll make sure happens.
With NCRS?
So NCRS is still going to do theirs 4 to 6 because that's what they have to do on the 26th, and that's dealing with more of the environmental issues and engineering issues. But we can do a future open house on an evening, 6 to 7:30 or 6 to 8 or whatever the council decides, so that we can get more folks here when they're off work.
So your earlier question regarding the video,
So our policy in the past has been we won't read emails, and so the question would just come up. The idea would be if we're this is what I would suggest is if we read emails for one person, we read them for everyone. Same thing with videos. If we do it for one person, we do it for everyone. I know that there are people who can't attend. Either they work all the time or they're not in the country or things like that. But I think the council should help staff understand the policy you'd like to have us implement and let people know moving forward.
yeah. Councilman Swanson.
Oh, yeah. I think it's before we would allow that, I think we need to have it on the agenda as a policy discussion, rather than just kind of flying by the seat of our pants and deciding, okay, we're going to start allowing videotaped public comments or emails read. I think we ought to have that as a discussion item on a future agenda and give it some time and give it some thought. My inclination for tonight would be that we not play the video from Citizen Taylor. I'm interested to know what he says, but I don't think that anyway, I'm just getting redundant here.
Is that on Facebook?
It was just a link that was emailed.
Okay. Any other comments from the council? Councilman Turner?
I feel the same way Phil does, is that I don't think we should allow it tonight. If we decide later on that we can do this, as a read emails or show videos, then that's different. But right now, I'd say no.
Any other comments?
I agree.
Okay.
I feel the same.
Okay, that'd be the response.
Okay. So we'll set it for a future agenda discussion so that we have a clear policy for everyone moving forward.
Okay.
Mayor?
Item 4 then?
I think.
When we have that discussion, can we try to think of all the different ways that somebody might want to try to communicate without actually being here, so that we can discuss those and formulate some kind of a policy one way or the other?
And just so you know, there is a specific rule for council members or members of the board.
Correct.
Under state rule that allows them to participate electronically. So that's.
And we've done that, yeah.
The one exception is not for closed meetings, since
I'm thinking video, the email, somebody on speakerphone. There's a number of different ways that somebody might want to participate electronically without actually being here, and I think we ought to cover as many of them as we can.
Okay.
Thank you, council. Item 4 then will be the discussion and action on agreement with Double Lot Ranch. Presenter will be John Call.
So, council, this is, we've talked about this a couple times in the past. Some of those discussions, because it deals with the purchase or sale of property, have been in closed sessions. So this is the terms that have been proposed by the developer or the landowner. Mayor Taylor was heavily involved in negotiating this before he left. And then Matt Hardvigson and I have kind of carried the load since he left on getting this wrapped up. Essentially what it's for is the 6.6 acres of the pond that you've seen. Where's my let me just pull it up again. So it's this 6.6 acres that incorporates this boundary here, or this project. Under this agreement, there are a few things that the city's committing to. We've assigned a value to that property. That value is based off of the appraisal of the existing pond. It's a discount over what that value came in at, and it's at $200,000 an acre. At 6.6 acres, that's $1.32 million, or $1,320,000. The developers agreed to, instead of take cash for that, he would receive an impact fee waiver for parks impact fees and stormwater impact fees. That's allowed under the state Impact Fee Act. It's called the dedication in lieu of fee, meaning that instead of paying us money, he's going to dedicate facilities worth that same value or construct them. A good example would be a developer could build a road that's planned on our capital improvement project list instead of paying road impact fees. In this case, we're dealing with stormwater and parks facilities, and that's part of the agreement. In the agreement, there's a term, an ERU. That means an equivalent residential unit. Think of that as a single-family home. What we do is when we're calculating impact fees, everything's reduced down to an ERU number, so that when a Smith's comes in and puts in an 8-inch water meter instead of a 1-inch water meter, there's a multiplier that says an 8-inch meter is 30 ERUs, and we use that to base the impact fee on. So it's the impact on the system based on what a typical house does. And it's a kind of a technical term, but essentially we're trying to take every business and compare it to a single family home and see how that multiplies out for how much more they're impacting the system. One of the things, and this comes up with the discussion tonight, there's no reason the city has to approve this tonight. I know that the council, you of course can. The landowner is not pushing. There's plenty of time if there's things we need to look at. I know that they've gone through quite a bit, but there is one thing that I wanted to identify, and this is based on some of the comments made tonight. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the right paragraph. So this paragraph G down here, I'll scroll it up to the top since it bleeds over into 2 pages. So it commits the city to putting a detention basin and a park on that property. That's one of the things that the developer's been concerned about, is that there at least be a park. That doesn't mean there has to be a swimming pond, fishing pond, Pine View facility. It just means that the city is committing to putting a park on the property. That section of the town doesn't have a lot of parks near it. The closest parks would be the City Center Park, or the North Ogden Park, Lowman View Park up on Alberta, and probably Green Acres. Those would be the 3 closest parks. Or you could count the pool, although it does require admission. People can't just go and recreate on a day that it's not open, or in the fall, that type of thing. So this, and on that same topic, there is under this obligation, even our code, if it is a detention basin, our code's going to require some sort of a landscaping to be installed, whether it be cobble or sod and sprinklers. And so that's part of the reason that most of our detention basins end up being parks, is that our code requires sprinklers or some other type of surfacing to be installed. It usually is significant expense. In fact, if you looked at the estimate from the engineer for the facility in the handout during the open house, I think it was $1.15 just to do sod per square foot. And so if you're looking at a 6-acre piece of ground, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars just for sod, and then more for sprinklers, and so there are some significant expenses that are going to be associated with any sort of a detention basin that we build. I think staff would recommend that we do commit to build some sort of a facility there, park or otherwise, but exactly what that is still open for discussion. Just because we want to, dual use facilities work really well for the city. Oftentimes they have a lot of problems with them associated as well. I mean, Wadman or Orton Park are sometimes flooded and they can't play soccer or, things like that. We even had our grass die last summer in Orton Park during the spring because it just got flooded too long. So that's why we've just been looking at some different types of multi-use facilities to make the park function. In this agreement, it also, as it was identified, it talked about the number of units per acre that the developer would be allowed to do. And I forgot which paragraph it's under. Oh, it's under future agreement. Right here, number 5. And so this paragraph is based on the zone that was approved for Village at Prominence Point. That's roughly 20 units to the acre. The heights are similar to that. This property is in the master plan, zoned for medium to high density residential. And in fact, it actually specifically identifies it as the MPC zone, I believe. But that's I think it's because it's in between the apartments in Harrisville and the townhomes in North Ogden. The idea that a more intensive use could be more appropriate. That being said, the developer has already approached the city about developing the southern portion, essentially everything below the pond. So let me flip this the right way. Oop. So the area down here, that he's approached the city about putting townhomes in. So not going to that 20 units to the acre number, it'd be closer to 10. And essentially it's the same, the landowner's going to sell it to the same developer who just did the townhomes directly to the east that we call the ranches. Like there again, we don't have to approve this tonight. And the council could take some time and drive through there and see what you think, but it's one of those things where we've, from a staff perspective, have some level of comfort, at least in my dealings with the owner, indicating that it's more important to him to get a quality project than maximum density, which is why once he saw those townhomes being built, he was open to the idea of selling them to that same developer to finish his project moving west. The other thing this agreement does is it does commit the city to do there will be some infrastructure improvements. Essentially, there'll be a storm sewer line that runs from this corner of the facility out, as well as a sewer line that runs from where the bathrooms would be down to the bottom, and then do an all-surface road to this corner, essentially for access to the parking lot. So there's some things that we're committing to utility-wise or infrastructure-wise that would make our park function, because we'd actually not planned on this being developed, because every indication we'd been given was it wasn't going to be developed, but the market is the market. And so we've been, so actually some of these things work better, meaning that it's not just going to be an all-surface road. For most of it, it sounds like they're actually talking about possibly paving all the roads that you see from here all the way down to the south end, and then east to west. So, that there would be, instead of people having to go through and pass the Montessori School and pool, they could actually just go straight out to 2600, both from the townhomes and from the park. Did council have any questions about what was in the agreement, what you saw? I know that the owner is out of town for I think another week or so I can't get any responses back from him, but anything that the council's thinking would be helpful. I mean, my personal perspective, I feel like we've reached a pretty decent deal with this landowner. He's under no obligation to sell the city the property. At this point, if if this was not a developer or not a landowner who wanted to work with us, I think we would end up probably condemning this portion of the property anyways, because we need to put a detention basin somewhere, and it has to be close to the existing basin, and this is a fairly good location for us. So, yeah.
If the Department of Agriculture grant was not awarded as we anticipate, if Pineview backed out, then we'd build a retention basin and some kind of park amenity, correct?
Correct.
Would a large retention basin that was similar to Wadman, would that count towards our ordinance as a park amenity, or would we need to put some playground equipment in?
So it would be a park. If you had something like Wadman Park or like Orton Park is probably the best example.
Sure.
Because there's nothing in the actual basin and really not much in the city-owned portion of that park. That would count. Although if we probably would try to put some flat spots in that are out of the water level for some restrooms, Boweries, things like that. So at least if it does turn into another soccer field, lacrosse field, something like that, that there's still the facilities there to support that.
That was my next question. Was we could do like we've done with Wadman or Orton and use it for lacrosse or soccer or any of those kinds of things.
Yep. Yeah. And if a comment was made, if we just do Pineview and not the recreation portion, or at least not the pond recreation portion, I think this agreement would bind us to doing some sort of a recreation. There are different designs. You could just do the Pineview basin that's deep and not do the wading side of the pond, and instead turn that into a field of some sort. So it wouldn't be a beach. It would be, there's other options out there, and that's the purpose of the open house, is to explore those. And you've heard lots of different options bounced around tonight. But this would obligate us to a park of some sort, which would at the bare minimum mean grass and irrigation, and at least probably restroom facilities, in my opinion. So.
So,
Turner?
Couple questions on the. There a get out of this agreement clause in here at all? For let's say the property on 2700 falls through, and we don't sell it for some reason. Is there if we agree to this, is there a way we get out of this with it?
So if we agree,
or is this agreement contingent on that selling?
So it's not contingent on that selling. This agreement essentially facilitates the sale of that property, and I think this, from staff's perspective, I think it's going to be in the city's best interest to sell that property for the sales tax and property tax it can generate. So I think at least from my perspective of this agreement, there's no reason why the city doesn't want this property. But you're right, there isn't essentially an out clause. If that property deal falls through, we're essentially committed to buying the property. There again, we're not exchanging the cash, it's exchanging a waiver of impact fees, which actually helps our bottom line in some good ways. So.
And then, thank you. And then the future agreement, maybe I'm not reading it right or something like this, but this, the 6.6 acres is just the pond area, right? It's
Correct.
Not in the area south. But the way I read that, it's addressing that if in the future, if we decide not to put the pond there, then the developer can develop some of that property, the 6.6, because it doesn't talk about the property south in there that I could see.
So the 6.6 acres will actually be transferred to the city. It'll be in the city's name, and so they won't be able to develop it. What it does do is allows for them to use 10% of the property, so essentially 0.66 acres of the property can be counted towards their open space requirement. So they won't actually be developing the landscaping or anything like that on the city property, but if they were required to have 2 acres as part of their as part of their development, they'd be able to take off 0.66 acres because they're right next to this piece of the open space. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So,
I just didn't get that in that, and so, but again, I'm not an attorney and don't want to be. So.
So it's relating to the remainder of the roughly 40 acres that are there, would be zoned as that part of that MPC, and with the joint meeting you had last week, that was what was discussed, was the townhome portion, which is the southern portion of that piece. So approximately 15 of the 40 acres are being proposed as townhomes. Then another 6 is being proposed for the park or the detention basin. So there's another 19 roughly acres left over for future development that would be tied into this master plan community zone / development agreement that the council would approve.
Isn't there something in the MPC zone that says a certain percentage has to be commercial?
Yep. And so
that other 19 is what we would plan that would have to be commercial.
So the MPC zone has 2 provisions, one that says a certain percentage has to be commercial, and then another provision that says whatever the city council puts in the development agreement is the rules for the property. But we are recommending commercial. The developer, the current landowner, actually anticipates that when the Old Basin property develops, that will open up commercial potential for that piece, because now they're in proximity to some of the larger anchor tenants. It's probably going to be smaller shops, things like that. It's not going to be a large store. It'll be 2,000, 3,000 square foot pads of some sort that'll probably pop in, and we've talked about ways to encourage maybe the vertical type development, like that you see on 25th Street, where you've got commercial on the bottom floor and then apartments or condos above. That type of thing would be what might work here, but that would all be stuff that we would propose that it be done like Village at Prominence Point. For those of you who weren't on the council at the time that was approved, the site plans and elevations of those buildings haven't been approved for the commercial components because the council has to approve those, meaning that they're going to come back to the council because it's going to be based on tenants. And we would actually recommend the same provision be applied, that the developer can't just slap any type of building in there. It's got to be an elevation that's approved by the city council. And the other thing that's in here is the requirement that all the exterior materials be the cementitious siding, brick, or natural stone, which is the same requirement on the that we did on the Village at Prominence Point, and we would not recommend that the council waive from that. And the developer or the landowners committed that, yeah, that's what they want. In fact, I think you heard the proposed developer of the townhomes say last week they don't want any stucco, they want hardy board, because it's a project they're going to own and rent out the townhomes, and they want something that lasts. So.
And then one other question. The pipe that we got to run from 2600 over there that we're going by the monastery school and stuff, is that all part of this agreement? Because is that on double lot, right? Or is that?
So it actually, I thought this agreement identified the existence of the easement already. That's right here. So it says, it identifies that we've already bought the easement from the school, and that we'll be putting that line in on the east side of this project property. Originally, we had talked about going across the middle of the property. Let me go back to the map. So we were going to tie it straight here, down between the buildings and the outdoor arenas and stuff, and that gave the landowner some heartburn, because it dramatically would affect where buildings could be placed in the future. So by going down the east side, it actually made this deal a whole lot easier for him and a whole lot easier for us, because now we're dealing with another quasi-governmental entity. I mean, the charter school still is a private entity, but their approach to things is more like a government in some ways. And we've got plenty of space to get to our pipe, where in the future we might have had to go around buildings and things, that it ended up being a really good deal for all of us. And Matt Hardvickson was instrumental in getting that approval for us. So, yeah.
That's all I got right now.
Going back to number 5. At the very first portion of that, am I understanding it correctly that if in the future the MPC zone was not granted, that then the property owner would be automatically granted the R4 zone and could have up to 20 units per acre? Is that correct?
Yes, that's the way this is written.
Okay.
And with the understanding that they still would have the restrictions that are identified here, like the 25% vegetative open space.
Sure.
And the materials requirements as well. Right now, 20 is about the max we allow in the R4 zone under the PRUD ordinance, if I remember correctly. We don't have an example of that in the city, but it would probably look fairly similar to the apartments just directly west of this property. If you were there's some 3-story buildings, and that's probably the type of thing that would fall in the R4 zone. The other property in the city that is currently developing in the R4 zone is the assisted living center down off 1700. That was actually, I believe, approved under the R4 zone. That was before the MPC zone was ever created. So that allowed for that type of a facility, as well as the individual cottages that'll be around it down there. So.
And when will the rezone request for the MPC be coming to us?
So it is. They've already filed an application, and the Planning Commission is going to hear it. I don't think this next meeting, which is actually June 27th, I believe it's in July. Okay. And so it would be coming from them with a recommendation on what to do. But we will start with the Village at Prominence Point development agreement as kind of the template to base everything on. Because it's easier to build off of a template than start from scratch. And as you've seen from the developer last week, that caused them some frustration because it was pretty tight on what they had committed to, and so it would be the same type of a thing. We'd want them strongly held to the commitments. And from my perspective, I feel like this agreement is ready for approval, but I also don't, there's been a lot of things that you've probably heard from residents tonight in the open house and others that, if there's other things you'd like us to look at, we're happy to spend the time.
Mayor? Personally, I'd like to have another week to look at it.
Okay.
To look through it and make sure I understand that my interpretation of what's in it is actually what's there, and give it a little bit more thought. That's what I'd like, since we're not in a rush.
Any other questions or discussion?
I agree with Phil. I'd like a little more time.
Okay.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay. And if you have any language edits that you would like to suggest, go ahead and email them to me. Probably copy everyone on the council so that everyone kind of knows what's going on, and then I can see if I can get a response from the landowner on if he's okay with those tweaks. Especially if it's a clarification, that would be. Then hopefully next week we can have a draft that works for everyone.
Okay. We need to make a motion on that to table it. Okay.
We need to make a motion to table.
No.
Okay. Thank you, Council, for your comments and suggestions. Next item is item 6. No, pardon me, item 5. Discussion or action to consider an ordinance adopting the North Ogden City budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. Our presenter will be Evan Nelson, our Finance Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are to the point of proposing approval of our final budget for fiscal year 2019. We held our public hearing last Tuesday on June 5th, and we are here to propose final adoption of the budget. An ordinance has been included in the council packet for this purpose. We reviewed the changes last week that have been proposed since the tentative budget was adopted. We actually have another change since last week. We finally got the numbers from Weber County for our property tax revenues. These are based on the certified property tax rate. And that number came in just a little bit lower than what we were expecting by about $2,500. So we've made an adjustment to have the property tax revenue estimate be exactly what Weber County is estimating. And then we adjusted our sales tax estimate to make up that difference, $22,496. So the property tax rate, the certified rate is 0.001156, and that's estimated to generate about $1,174,195 in property tax revenue. So that change has been incorporated in this final version. I also wanted to provide a little more information in response to some of the questions and comments at the public hearing for the budget last week. We had one resident ask a question about employee benefits that are included in the budget. And so I wanted to make sure you and the public understand what these benefits are. So here's a list of the benefits that are part of the expenditure line for benefits that are in the departments throughout the budget. So payroll taxes are included in that. Utah State Retirement System expenses, medical and dental insurance, health savings account contributions, 401k match, which is set at 3%, life insurance, accidental death and dismemberment insurance, short and long-term disability, and workers' compensation. Specifically, the question that the resident asked was related to the police department. There are different retirement programs in the Utah retirement system, and police officers are in a program that's separate from other government employees. So police officer contributions to retirement can be as high as 35.7% of the salary amount. So it is true that there's a significant expense that the city puts into the benefits provided. I think Annette had some comments related to benefits as well.
Council, also on that line item that I believe the citizen was talking about on those benefits, we also calculated into that some police officers that could be retiring because we have to pay out to them their leave and those kinds of things. And so I think we counted on 2 police officers. Was that right? That could retire. There could be more, but we at least counted on 2 so we'd have it in the budget. So that's what made that a little bit higher. Also, I wanted to explain a little bit why municipal benefits are, why we give such good benefits. Part of the reason is our salaries. You remember a few years ago, the council had us do a salary survey and compare it to the public sector. Do you remember when we did all that? And we had a committee come in and go through that, and it was not something everybody wanted to see because if you remember right, what were those wages like? Any of you that were here and remember that? It made our wages look really low, and it caused a lot of problems for us as department managers and for the council and everything. But municipalities have been known to give better benefits because on some of those benefits we're not paying taxes. We do not have to pay the federal government taxes, like on the 401k match. We don't have to do that so we try to give those things in lieu of wages. The city cannot afford to pay what the private sector pays, but we try to keep our salaries somewhat decent, but our benefits a little better, so we can bring in good employees and people that want to work here and want to stay here. So that's just so the public knows why those kinds of things happen. So and how that survey went, I still have a copy of it. The city never ever adopted it. There was no way we could do that without raising taxes seriously. So anyway, I've still got that on hand if anybody would like to look at that. But I wanted to bring that up so that the public would know what happens there.
Thank you, Annette. The other item, and maybe this has been responded to already, but is the amphitheater. We had several comments on that. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody is understanding what the budget is reflecting. The final budget for the amphitheater for the next phase that John mentioned is $695,780. This is in the Capital Improvement Fund. $300,000 of that is an anticipated third round of ramp grant funding, and the remainder, $395,780, is to be funded through park impact fee revenues. And it, as has been mentioned, it's true we don't know for certain if we'll get that grant, but from the financial perspective, we are required to adopt an annual budget. So not only related to this project, but to many of the expenditures and projects in the city, we have to look forward more than a year to try to guess what the expenditures are going to need to be. And so a lot of what we have in the budget really are estimates. And as we get to the point of being able to complete the projects, we usually get a better idea of what the actual expenditures will be. But the numbers from a budget perspective really are estimates, and we do our best to be good in our guessing, to be conservative in estimating revenues, and it's not a super critical matter that we get it exactly right, because we can revisit the budget throughout the fiscal year. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understands that concept.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Since this is my first month dealing with the budget, is it possible not to budget for that $300,000, and then if we get it, we still have another 6 months in the year, because our 19-20 budget starts next year in July, and we could still use that $300,000 if we get it from July to January.
So we could
and save the park impact fees because you don't have to spend impact fees our first year.
Sure. Yeah, that's absolutely possible if that's what the council would like. It could be budgeted now. It could be budgeted in January when we apply for the grant. It could be budgeted in March or whatever month, March or April, when we know if we got the grant, or it could be even the next fiscal year. So it's completely up to the council.
Okay. Well, that's the way I'd like to see it. I'd rather that we hold off on budgeting something that we don't even know we're going to have. Like you said, it might be, if it gets awarded in January, when can you spend it? March, April? That's close to July. Why don't we just wait till July? That's my own personal view.
Sure. Tiffany's not here, but I assume that they're probably planning on another production next summer. I don't know if that's true, but in the past, our plan has been to try to receive the grants, get the project done so the production can happen that same year. But I'm guessing because I don't know if that's what she's planning.
Like I said, sorry, this is my first month.
No, we're happy to make adjustments if we need to.
I need to catch up quicker.
And I think you hit it spot on. There's no reason why we couldn't even just say that, we don't know if we're going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's wait and budget for it once we know we're going to get it. I just caution you against using that same approach in everything.
Right.
Because almost everything is a future fund that we might not get.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
So I guess it would be good for us to know how everybody else feels so we can know if we need to change the number.
Sorry to open something up.
That's okay.
Darn you.
I know.
Evan?
Oh, go ahead.
What is the criteria law-wise that we have to, if we're going to change it, that means it needs to come back next week? Or do we have to adopt it this week? Final budget has to be done by the end of the month, I believe, right? So, so you understand my question. We have to,
Yeah, so we still have time.
Okay.
We can even, include the change in your motion and still approve it if that's what you'd like to do. Or we can bring it back another week.
Okay.
The way we've done it in the past, council, is if there's lots of changes, then we push it off. If it's easy enough to articulate in the motion, then we'll just pass the budget and say, with the understanding that this line should read 0 instead of this, or that type of a thing. So.
Yes.
Evan, just to be clear, in the past when we have reopened the budget mid-year, throughout the year, we can reopen it both for budgeting and expenditure, correct? So
Yes.
if we have unanticipated revenues that come in, we can open it back up to recognize those revenues, and then we can also expenditure. Yeah.
Yes, revenues, expenditures.
Your fault.
We can make those changes.
Just want to make sure it's clear.
Anytime we open the budget, we have another public hearing, we advertise, so we go through that public process.
And I don't think there's been a year we haven't opened the budget, as things
Since
come
I've
up.
been on.
Yeah.
Any other questions or discussion for Evan?
I'm curious what everyone else is thinking about. Last week I had the notes, everyone that spoke about the budget all had the same concern about, I take it back. One person said budget it and spend it, but everyone else is saying let's hold the money until we actually know for sure. So I'd like to know what everyone else kind of feels.
Well, I think I agree with you. I like your approach, frankly. It being in the budget doesn't mean we have to spend it. There's
Right.
There's revenues that we budget each year that we end up not spending, and so the fact that it's in there as a $695,000 budget doesn't mean that we end up spending it. But I like your approach. I'm sitting here trying to think of what the downside is. Just trying to look at both sides.
Yep.
And Evan, what's your thought?
It's fine with me.
Well, that's an easy answer. I want to know what your real thought. I want your Jim Urey interpretation of what's going on.
It's a good thing he's here tonight.
I think we've got our Urey analysis sitting right here to the left.
Council.
Yes.
If where, as we've indicated, we don't have a specific, we are going to spend this much on this, and I think it actually makes it really clear that it will come back to the council. There'll be another public hearing to discuss exactly what's going into it. It might actually be really beneficial to approach it this way. Obviously from staff, it'd be nice to know, we can plan on $700,000 and start looking at that budget. But if you're okay, we'd still probably shoot for that mark. and as we bring back ideas on what to spend that on for that facility.
Good on you, new guy.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Evan?
So so now, are you saying we put this
So now explain it to Cheryl.
as written? Approve it?
So maybe
And hold that, or just leave that part out? I'm confused even more so.
So in my mind, if you don't want to budget for the amphitheater yet, we would take line 404116 to 0, line 4030-220 to 0, and line 4030-110 to 0. That zeroes out the 2 revenues and the 1 expenditure line.
So 404116, what was the other 2?
4030-220 and 4030-110. So that eliminates the revenues that were to support the expenditure, and it eliminates the expenditure from the budget.
Which 2 were the revenues, the 220 and 110?
Yes, 4030-110, 4030-220. So the 4030-220 line is park impact fee revenue. So that money is going to come to the city, and whether we've budgeted for it or not, it will come, and we'll record it there. But it's just not going to be balancing an expenditure. So it would work fine to do that.
So, Councilwoman Stoker, is that
Does that
answer your question okay?
Somewhat.
In other words, we're pulling those things from the budget, and they'll be looked at again at some other time,
Reopened up.
based on whether we get that revenue or not, or that grant.
We may want to at least ask the question, I don't know if John knows, but would a ramp application be weaker if there's not a budgeted match?
I think it might make it a little weaker if there's not a budgeted match, but we would know that with enough time ahead of the application because in order to make the application, we'll give them specific details on we're using it for this, and then we'll identify, and the city funds that are going to help compensate is this. And so we'll just need to make sure we're far enough ahead that we have time to do our public hearings. And, hopefully if the council's all in support of that approach, the biggest issue you might have is it'll be on a shorter timeline, meaning you might have to approve the budget before the ramp is due, in 3 days. And we'll need to try and make sure we give us enough time to think it through with our public hearing so that you get all the feedback you need before that decision's made. And I think we could pass on to Tiffany and the other folks who are involved, my office and the mayor, to start looking at exactly what we want to see in phase 2 and what it's going to cost. So.
Okay, we can do that. Any other questions or discussion? I would entertain a motion to that.
You had the idea, brother.
All right.
I mean, it's nice not to have to make the motion for once.
Well,
The ordinance number is 2018-08.
All right, I make a motion that we pass the final budget fiscal year 2019, ordinance number 2018-08, with the removal of
line item
40-41-16, 40-30-220, 40-30-110.
Take those.
There has been a motion to pass the budget based on ordinance number 218-08 and delete the items that have been mentioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Have a second? A vote then. We'll start with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Evan?
You're welcome.
It's a great idea.
We'll now open the meeting up for public comment.
Item
We
number
still
six.
have number 6.
Did I miss one?
Evan's still
Sorry. Discussion or action to consider resolution for Public Treasurer's Investment Fund Account Management. Presenter will be Evan Nelson. Thank you, Evan.
Thanks for not forgetting this item. The city maintains funds at a couple of banks, but we put aside money for investment with the Public Treasurer's Investment Fund, and that's managed by the State Treasurer's Office. They're changing their procedures and their website for who can access that money and access those accounts. They basically want to have the board that oversees a public entity pass a resolution that designates who has the authority to access the accounts. And so we're proposing the adoption of this resolution. It has myself, the finance director, as well as Jamie Jones, the city treasurer, as the two authorized users of that system. And we're proposing that you give us that authorization. And this would be able to be, changed from time to time as needed. But this is coming at the request of the managers of the Public Treasurer's Fund. Or if there are other individuals you would like on that list, it can be more than 2, but it needs to be at least 2.
Do we have a resolution number?
Yes, it's 04-2018.
Mayor, I'd move that we approve Resolution 04-2018, Resolution for Public Treasurer's Investment Fund Account Management, as presented by Evan Nelson.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Swanson to approve the resolution for Public Treasurer's Investment Fund Management. We have a second by Councilwoman Stoker. Voting begin with any other questions or discussion? Voting then by Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Motion passes. We'll now ask for a motion to open the RDA agenda, discussion or action to consider ordinance adopting by the RDA budget for fiscal year 2018-2019.
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll move into the RDA budget. Discussion or action to consider ordinance accepting the RDA budget for fiscal year. Our presenter will be Evan Nielsen, our finance director.
Last week we reviewed these 2 budgets. If you remember, the CDA budget is currently at 0, and we covered all of the items in the redevelopment fund budget. And so we would propose adoption of these budgets by the RDA board using the ordinance that was included in your packet. If you have any questions about those budgets, I'm happy to respond.
Is there an ordinance? What is the ordinance number?
It's RDA 2018-08.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we pass the RDA ordinance 2018-08, adopting the budget for the fiscal year on the RDA 2018 through 2019.
We have a motion to consider an ordinance adopting the RDA budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. Begin the voting with Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Evan. Now entertain a motion to reconvene the public meeting.
So moved.
Have a motion to reconvene the public meeting. Second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Meeting is now open. We'll now entertain any public comments.
Jim Erie, 1615 North Mountain Road. I won't have to attend very many more meetings because I think Ryan has taken my place here on this council with some of his comments. Congratulate you on listening to some of the comments today that people made and going in the direction you did on that. That was good to see. Also congratulate you on continuing your deficit spending in the RDA and CDA accounts.
Okay.
Which we know have no money in them. So, but we're hoping that they'll get some money in them someday. I wasn't able to be here to the budget hearing last week, but there's a concern I have. One of the things I'd like to ask, if you could tell me how far, last year we went down 2 or 3 blocks with new light poles. How far is that going to go this year?
Dave, you want to answer that question?
So the second phase is already done. Well, not done. The poles aren't up, but the drilling's been done. The bases are all in. That will take us to 2,000. And then this year's budget with the plans and funding will get us all the way down to 17.
Okay, so this year's budget, what you're going to do in this coming year will take us all the way down to the city limits?
Yes, sir.
Which is what, 1,500?
No, down to 17.
1,700. So we still got to go to 1,500.
Yeah, that was kind of the plan. I
Okay.
think phase 4 was to go down to 1,500 and then even maybe go above 2,600 here, right in front of Lee's. But that one hasn't been planned. Just this one is.
So I when I was on the council and we talked about the fancy light poles, and I thought we could put just some nice metal light poles all the way down and not have the hanging flowers. And I asked the mayor who was going to water those flowers, and he said we would get a volunteer. Well, talking with Evan tonight, looks like the volunteer is going to cost us $35,000 a year to water those plants. So I'd like to be the volunteer.
Are you applying?
I think if you're a volunteer, you don't have to pay taxes on that kind of stuff. I don't know, but I really, when we're looking at the budget, you know how tight-fisted I am because you sat with me for 4 years, but $35,000 doesn't include purchasing the plants. That just includes watering the plants. $35,000 could be used a lot in a lot better places than watering plants.
Thank you for your comment.
Aaron Christensen, 2428 Barker Parkway. I thank Mr. Uri for his comments, and I'm grateful for the service that he put on here as we've watched and listened to and read minutes from the past years. I'm grateful for the checks and the balances that he offered there. A couple questions. I'm grateful, Councilman Swanson, to have you put off that discussion of that agreement with Double Lot for another week. As I'm just glancing through it here, it looks to me like there's some things in there I would like to make sure, and maybe it doesn't do this, but it looks like there's some type of a zoning guarantee without a hearing, and it sounds like there's some issues there. If our valuation of that property that for the pond is comparable to the valuation of land on 2700, it would seem to me that land on 2700 is more valuable with the frontage and so to compare that land between the two would seem unequivocal And as far as again, I'm not an expert in this, but it looks like if the developer or the seller can use 10% of, or use the 6.6 acres that the city's now going to own towards his 10% of his open space. It was pointed out that I believe Utah law requires the city to pay property taxes, so we're paying property taxes on land that somebody else is counting towards theirs. I don't know if that's if my understanding is inaccurate. It seems to me like as a city we are creating a lot of amenities that may be nice and desirable, and yeah, I think of things in my garage that were nice and desirable. That tool that I bought, so I had it in hand for the one job that I did. I look at you, Carl, because you're the builder on the here. So, you know, we don't need to be everything and everything to everybody, and we don't need to provide all these amenities at the taxpayer's cost. And so I would encourage you to keep in mind what necessities are, what the function of government should be, and not create things that we are going to have to be paying for and maintaining down the road just because we get some money from somebody that gives us a discount up front doesn't mean that we didn't spend money to get it. So, getting a 50% discount on $1 million project still means we spent $500,000. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Christensen.
I got one more comment. I was just thinking about sitting here while I was sitting here at Jumuri, 1615 North Mountain Road. When we talked about the amphitheater, when we brought that up, whenever we brought it up, I asked the mayor then too, who's going to manage this? And his comment was the same as on the flowers. We'll get a volunteer. So please, when you start looking at budgets, let's not pay 70, 80, 100, 200. Well, I can tell you right now, I know Sandy City pays $200,000 in salaries to run their amphitheater. So let's not get a $200,000 volunteer to run the amphitheater.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Murray.
Okay, Dale Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. Just to kind of emphasize one thing, as I sat here, I hadn't really looked at this. I went through and I looked at the numbers on the project cost, the $7.1 million total estimate of the community or pond or whatever we're calling that. As I went down through there and I looked at irrigation facilities, flood control, detention basin, down to that point, there's this much expense to the city, zero. When we get into the recreation part of it, that's where our share kicks in, whether it's paid partly by NCRS or North Ogden City. And it just struck me, what really is going on here as we look at this as an alternative is, are we doing a functional facility where it's being funded by, of course it all comes out of our pocket in the end, federal grants or whatever, or out of our city budgets, the recreation piece is where we begin to have to pay. So before this thing's all finished and before the end of the day, strongly consider possibly pulling back on the recreation component of that and, you know, finding a little more economical way to do that. Just like if I was going to put a pool in my backyard, I can pick different options. I can have something pretty simple or something pretty elaborate. So as we get into the recreation component, I would beg you to be as frugal as possible on that side of it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Anderson. There's no other comment, then we'll move to the council for comments. Councilman Turner?
We had our mosquito abatement meeting last night, and they are actually having to spend more money on chemicals this year because I guess the mosquitoes are bad. They're more open water out west because the state burned a bunch of the
fragments.
stuff. Yeah, that stuff, and it's opened up more water, which caused more mosquitoes. But the call requests are way down, which means what the agency's trying to do with the mosquitoes is working. I just want to remind the residents that it's a free phone call to if you're having a party or a wedding reception or something and you want to make sure the mosquitoes are down and it's outdoors, you can call, give them an address, or go online, and it's free. They'll come and spray before the activity. So just a reminder there. So that's it.
Thank you. Councilman Barker, any comments this evening?
Yeah, I just got one. I don't know if you're going to bring it up. Our meeting next week, we meet as a fire district at 5 o'clock, and we're doing
6
our
o'clock next week. Or the
budget?
The public hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. I thought it was at 5 o'clock. Shows you how much I read my notices.
Which conflicts directly with
Yep.
this meeting.
I didn't know if there was a way we could push it back or an hour, half hour. I didn't know we were meeting at 6. But I knew I wanted to be there, and I'm sure Councilman Swanson would like to be there.
And which meeting are you talking about?
The fire district.
What we're asking is, can we move city council back to 6:30? I doubt that the public hearing will go long for the fire district, which starts at 6, so that people can be there. But that will take both of us out of council meeting until that's over, unless we can push it back to 6:30.
I won't be here next week either.
Okay.
So without him there and the two of us not there, you wouldn't have a quorum until we got there.
We need a motion to consider that, or can we just establish it then?
We have it established for the year at a certain time.
So we do have it established for the year at a certain time, but we could, I mean, that's adopted by resolution, right?
Yeah.
So we could do a motion to push that one back. The caveat is also if we don't have a quorum, we don't start the meeting until a quorum shows up typically, or we cancel it. But I think it'd be appropriate so that residents have enough time to know that it's delayed by half hour, or whatever council recommends.
Motion that?
Sure.
I have a question. Does the fire district always meet on a Tuesday night?
Yeah, third Tuesday of
Usually it's
every
at
month.
5.
Yeah.
And their meetings usually last
Less than an hour.
Yeah.
less than an hour?
Yeah.
45 minutes. But this one's at 6 because it's a public hearing for the fire district budget.
Okay.
They wanted people to be able to be there, so it's at 6.
So I'll make a motion that we postpone council meeting next week till 6:30.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we postpone the meeting until 6:30 next Tuesday. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
We have a public hearing.
That's all I had.
Okay. Councilman Swanson?
Just two things. One, Jim, he needs one of your hats. One of those nice little, sports caps, those Jaguar kind of English driving hat.
I don't think I could pull it off.
Oh, I think you could.
No new taxes and fees on it.
Well, you could put that on there too, but I think Yuri Jr. here, your minion, right? Could use one of those hats. The other is I'd like to get together with Dave and Republic Services regarding grass clippings. It's funny that you brought it up because this week when a month ago, I ordered my 3/4 of the year second black can to put grass clippings into, and that's all I put in it is grass clippings. And I'd like to look into the feasibility, what it would cost, what it would to have a green waste during the summer program, because it's really the only time we'd need it, and it would, in my mind, be for grass clippings only. Not for branches or anything like that, but grass clippings only, and see what the feasibility would be for Republic Services to just take it right over to our pit and dump it. If they even could do that in their trucks, I don't know.
They do. There's a few cities that, we can talk about it.
So if you will reach out to me tomorrow sometime, and let's plan a time where we can go down to Kurt's for a shake and figure it out. I mean, have a discussion.
Buy a mulching mower.
A lot of people have those, yeah.
I use.
But I have.
That's all I have.
Okay. Councilwoman Stoker?
Nope.
I don't have any further comments. Can I call?
Yeah. So, council, let me
I
just.
promoted you.
Yeah. Please don't. I don't like making policy. The two clarifications. I believe I misspoke. The price that we got for the existing detention basin was $250,000 an acre, is what we got for it. So my reference to the appraisal was that we were in the ballpark as far as the cost goes, but less than the basin, which is why we felt comfortable. And then the other question, or the other thing that was raised was we have paid for some of the detention basin improvements and future costs as well, particularly the piping to and out of the basin are expenses we are going to pay. So the way it's structured essentially in the documents is that the basin would be paid for by NCRS, but there are costs associated with getting the water to the basin and out of the basin. And in the summary document provided at the open house, it was about $627,000. So it's not completely free. And then I think, as I mentioned earlier, that there is an obligation to put some sort of sod or rock or landscape those, even if they just stay retention basins. And so I think we can provide more details as we go along on what that cost would be if it wasn't a recreation facility, and what the cost would be for the different types of facilities that we're considering. But it's not, we do have to put something in there, and I don't believe, and I'll double check with Matt on this, that the NCRS, I don't believe that covered landscaping because it was part of the recreation component that was 50-50. So even at that, I still think there would be a recreation component, so that NCRS would pay for half of the grass that we have to install regardless. Just as a clarification if I misspoke earlier. And those of you know that the skate park is fully open, being used again. The Parks Department had extreme difficulty keeping the users of the park off during the repair work, and because of that, there are significant issues with the paint because they didn't let it dry long enough and wouldn't stay off. We actually, I think I mentioned this before, but one of the employees who volunteered to go babysit the facility was harassed and run off the facility by, I hate to call it a gang of thugs, but a gang of pugs. I don't know. It was young individuals harassing another probably fellow classmate, someone who was under the age of 18 who had volunteered to go up there and sit to try and help out the Parks Department. And that's caused a lot of frustration in that department because we've done a lot to make it a nice facility, and now the paint doesn't look as good as we wish it did. That being said, it is a very popular facility. We have folks coming from Salt Lake and other places to come skate it. It was well designed and has been well implemented and well used. So that being said, also, I know you all received in your email, but we're doing the barbecue this Thursday, 11:30. Is when we'll start cooking, right, Annette?
11:30 to 1.
And till 1, and anytime you can be there, even if it's just swinging by to grab a burger, we'll be there and appreciate your help.
Boca burgers?
Do
I have to bring my own Boca burger?
I think we could probably scrounge up a Boca burger or mushroom burger or veggie or whatever.
That would work too.
So,
is the barbecue Thursday?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I misread. I thought it said Friday. I will be there then on Thursday.
Yeah, so it's Thursday. Yeah,
I can be there. Yeah.
Okay.
That's better.
Trying to think anything else that's going on. Just so you are aware, we have been working on a purchasing policy revising our purchasing policy. That'll be coming to the council here in the coming months. Now that the budget's over, Evan can put his full force behind that policy. He's already got his full force behind it, and it's just about ready to come. We're just working through some final tweaks. Imagine that we no longer will have an exception in our purchasing policy for telegraph services. So unless.
Oh, wait, Jim's not on the council anymore, so we don't need it.
So that's coming to you. And then there was a personnel policy change.
There's a couple, and those will be coming.
Okay, so there'll be a couple personnel policy changes coming as well.
The budget,
because of the budget, and just clarification on a few questions that have come up. So that's all I have.
Thank you. And it's been love.
I don't have anything, thank you.
Dave? Okay. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'd just like to ask where maybe Annette, maybe you let them know that pull off of Ice Wife passed.
No.
Yeah, where are they? Yeah. Thank you. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.